facing a brown bear that was more than 10 times stronger than himself. The hybrid dog Buck wasn't afraid. He walked towards it and kept making driving sounds. Only after the brown bear ran away in fear did he gently turn back and lead the Wolf pack to cross the river safely. But before hearing the call of the wild, Buck was still a domesticated dog. In the warm climate of Santa Clara County, the naughty Buck followed the butler through the noisy neighborhood to buy ingredients for the day. He greeted everyone enthusiastically, sometimes licking ice cubes, sometimes knocking down people reading newspapers, and sometimes chasing the mailman, scaring the other party to pedal his bicycle and run away desperately. The chaos on the street caught the attention of a down-and-out man. He looked at the energetic Buck and then at the advertisement in the newspaper, showing a creepy, sinister smile. This day was the birthday of Buck's owner, Judge Miller of Santa Clara County. Everyone in the entire manor was busy celebrating the birthday. Buck also received his task from the butler to wake up the little masters who were still sleeping. Buck was extremely excited. He rushed into the house like crazy and jumped around on the little master's bed. But soon he was attracted by the smell of roasted chicken and started to move to the kitchen, scaring everyone to immediately hide the roasted food. Looking at the empty table, Buck was extremely aggrieved. He frowned and silently accused the chef of being cruel. Of course, this didn't dampen Buck's determination to eat roasted chicken. Finally, when everyone was taking a group photo, Buck found an opportunity to steal food. He even appeared at the group photo scene with a chicken leg in his mouth. Everyone was shocked by his arrogance. Looking at the ruined birthday banquet, Master Miller, who had always doted on him, was angry. Helplessly, Miller locked him outside and asked him to reflect on his behavior during the day. Buck lay dejectedly on the ground. Soon, he smelled an alluring fragrance. Buck uncontrollably walked out of the yard and entered a cage specially set up for him. The greedy Buck was thus abducted and sent to the distant and cold Arctic. Buck tried to resist but was mercilessly beaten. However, this didn't destroy Buck's will. The clever Buck realized that counterattack wasn't the right way, so he lay quietly on the ground and waited for a new opportunity to come. When the man left, Buck concentrated all his strength on his neck. Soon he broke the rope and then easily twisted open the door lock and knocked over the dozing man and escaped. Unfortunately, he was trapped again. Looking at the broken ice floating on the water, Buck had nowhere to escape at all. He was desperate. The pet dog Buck from the south was kidnapped and sold to the frigid Arctic. He was led along the road by someone, but his thoughts were already distracted by the people and surroundings. Suddenly, he lifted one foot in panic and hesitated to put it down. However, the man tugged hard on the rope and dragged him into a patch of snow. This was Buck's first encounter with snow. The strange sensation made him wonder if he could survive. In a panic, Buck broke free from the rope and ran off. He accidentally knocked down an old man, like a child who had done something wrong. Buck carefully picked up the old man's harmonica and returned it to him. At the moment, the old man took the harmonica. The wheel of fate began to turn, but soon the dog trader caught up. He put a rope on Buck again and sold him to the postman Omar. Thus, Buck was fitted with a leather collar and became a member of the Arctic Postal Team, responsible for delivering mail to a place 800 kilometers away. The heavy leather collar made Buck very uncomfortable. But what bothered him even more was Spitz, the leader of the sled team. He was arrogant and overbearing, always snatching food from weaker team members. Buck couldn't stand it and quietly planned a provocation. On this day, Spitz once again took over the only water source. Whoever approached and tried to drink water would be menaced mercilessly by him. Buck was furious, so he took advantage of his size and smashed the thick ice layer, opening up a new water source for his companions to drink. This aroused Spitz's dissatisfaction and he began to target Buck. As a once pampered child, and this being his first time pulling a sled in the polar region, Buck was extremely unaccustomed. He was always inattentive and chased after rabbits as he pleased, forgetting that he was at work. Seeing this, Spitz deliberately accelerated. Unprepared, Buck soon fell and thus dragged down the entire team. Fortunately, Omar didn't scold him but encouraged him to stand up and keep going. Buck was very clever. Soon he got out of his self-absorbed state and began to enjoy the fun and joy of work. On this day, another postman was walking carefully on the ice surface to check if the ice was solid. Suddenly, the ice cracked and she fell into the icy river. At the critical moment, Buck stepped forward. He quickly jumped into the ice river, bit her clothes, and tried hard to drag her towards the hole. With his help, the female postman was rescued, but Buck was washed away and disappeared from Omar's sight. Omar didn't give up on Buck. He took out a dagger and tried to smash the ice to save Buck, but it was futile. In despair, someone handed him a stick. Omar took it without looking and started chiseling wildly, but soon, Omar seemed to realize something. He suddenly turned around and looked. He found that it was Buck who had handed him the stick. He gratefully hugged Buck and was thankful for his existence. The scene of Buck getting along harmoniously with his master aroused Spitz's jealousy. Taking advantage of the night after the master and his companions had fallen asleep, he sneaked up on Buck. Buck was soon injured and couldn't move lying on the ground. Suddenly, he saw a majestic gray wolf silently watching him. The rest of his companions woke up after hearing the commotion and kept barking to encourage him. Buck seemed to be infused with infinite power. He burst out with tremendous fighting strength and wrestled with the annoying Spitz. Spitz was soon defeated and slunk away. Just like that, Buck replaced Spitz and became the new leader of the team. Buck popped out of the snow and stood at the front of the team on his own, waiting for his master to give the lead command. But the master dragged him to the back of the team because he thought Buck didn't have enough experience. Buck was super mad, then lay there lazily on the ground, showing his unhappiness. With his influence, the other dogs all went on strike and wouldn't cooperate with Omar's work. Seeing that the letter delivery was gonna be late, Omar had to cave in and let Buck be the leader at Omar's order. Buck led all the sled dogs to run like crazy. The speed was faster than ever. Just when Buck was enjoying his work, an avalanche hit. Omar quickly told Buck to turn left. But Buck disobeyed and sped up towards the avalanche because he saw a cave ahead where they could hide. Buck's judgment was right in the face of the huge avalanche. The team got through safely. This was also the first time they delivered the letter on time. But soon, Buck's fate changed again because of the popularity of telegraphs. The postman company where Omar worked announced it was closing down. Just like that, Buck lost his master again. Even though Omar was really reluctant, he could only sell the whole sled dog team to a group of new gold diggers as the boss ordered. These people were greedy and heartless and knew nothing about sleds. The sled was frozen by ice and snow. Buck led the team and tried hard, but couldn't move it for a long time. This nasty man took out a stick and wanted to hit Buck. Luckily, an old man found out in time and stopped him. Then he helped them loosen the sled because he had met Buck before and couldn't bear to see him suffer. John Nuzley reminded the gold diggers that summer was coming soon and this season wasn't good for gold digging in the river. But the greedy gold diggers didn't listen at all and insisted on taking the dogs across the river. Buck only led the team and moved forward with difficulty. After several hours of non-stop hard work, the dog's strength was all used up. What was even scarier was that Buck smelled danger and wouldn't move forward no matter what. The rude man was really angry and beat on Buck. The leader, Buck couldn't take it and fainted. The man was furious and took out a pistol and pointed it at Buck's body. The kind John helped Buck again. He warned the gold diggers that to dig for gold this season was for sure asking for trouble. But the gold diggers, blinded by desire, wouldn't listen. They left Buck, who was in a coma, and forced the dogs keep walking on the shaky glacier. Buck was taken home by the old man after 2 days. Buck woke up and found his companions were all gone. Buck looked at the melting ice and kept howling, trying to get a response from his companions. The quietly flowing glacier silently told their fate. Buck's painful howls brought back the John's sad memories. He started drinking at home, trying to find a little peace under the influence of alcohol. Buck could feel his sadness, but for John's health, he took the wine bottle, ran outside, buried it in the snow, and then quietly snuggled up beside him and listened to him tell stories about his son. Just like this, they became friends. They drove a canoe and started an adventure to fulfill the agreement between John and his son. After a long time of drifting, they finally got to the place on the map. Here, the scenery was beautiful and there was also a wooden house. They planned to live here and enjoy the rest of their lives. The old man was astonished to discover gold in the river. He dived down without a second thought, fished out the massive gold and held it up high to admire its glow. Then he started grabbing gold with tools. Seeing this, Buck jumped into the water to help. Of course, he had no idea what gold was. He just blindly picked up a stone or a piece of gold and tossed it back into the water. When they were having a great time, a white figure suddenly darted out from the riverbank. Buck's attention was instantly diverted. With John's permission, Buck rushed out like the wind and followed the shadow into the thick forest. He felt the aura of freedom and wilderness, and a certain hidden power deep inside him began to stir. Just when he was hesitating, the white shadow appeared behind him. It was a female Volf. She eyed Buck curiously. Buck was like a shy big boy, standing stock still in a daze. Then he shyly extended his paw, but was slapped away in disgust by the white Volf. Looking at the paw prints left by the female Volf on the ground, Buck fell in love. He lost his appetite and couldn't stop thinking about her, longing to see her again. But he didn't see her for a long time, so Buck took the initiative every day. He quietly slipped out of the door and wandered in the wilderness, looking for the female Volf's trace. Finally, one day, they met again. At this time, the female Volf was with the Volf pack hunting a wild boar. When they attacked, the Volf King accidentally fell into the river. At the critical moment, the Volf King grabbed a dead tree and wasn't swept away by the turbulent river. But the other wolves were helpless and could only be anxious. Just then, Buck stepped forward. He jumped to the other side of the river. First bit the tree trunk with his mouth, but the tree trunk was too fragile and broke right away. Then Buck propped up the dead tree with his body. At this moment, his wildness was completely unleashed. With his strong body, he rescued the Volf King. In this way, Buck won the recognition of the Volf pack and followed them to learn hunting skills every day. Then he took the hunted prey home and gave it to John. In the process of hunting with the Wolfpack, he learned to trap, ambush, and kill prey. The efficient and fierce hunting style of the Wolfpack deeply influenced him. He felt the power of the group and adapted to the hierarchy and cooperation of the Wolfpack. Bravery, independence, and wildness gradually showed on him. Although Buck would rush home to sleep every night, John keenly sensed that Buck had changed. He seemed to have found his way back. Until this early morning, Buck brought the white wolf home. John finally understood that Buck really found his own belonging. So he began to pack up and decided to leave tomorrow morning. Before leaving, John made a final farewell to Buck. Encouraged by John, Buck dashed towards the forest and pursued his own life. On this night, when Buck left, John was shot. A greedy gold digger discovered this place and tried to monopolize everything. At the critical moment, Buck suddenly appeared and tackled the gold digger and pushed him into the wooden house. He died in the raging desire. Poor John also didn't survive because of his serious injury. Buck stayed by John's side until the last moment of his life. Later, Buck became the Wolf King and had his own wife and children. But every time he passed by the wooden house, he would slow down and recall his life in human society.
These may be my final days. I wish I could stand up again like in the old days instead of lying here right now in a puddle of my own making. However, I remember watching a documentary about Mongolia on TV, where people believe that when a dog has lived out its lifetime as a dog, its next incarnation will be as a human. Hearing Denny coming back home and worried sick about me, I have never yearned so much that I could talk like a human and tell him how much I've loved him throughout my entire life. On that day, at the small farm where I was born, just moments after I first opened my eyes to catch a glimpse of the world, I hazily saw him walking towards us. I wasn't the most active among a tangled mass of paws and tails, but Denny chose me from the pile of pups. Looking into his eyes, I knew I was different than other dogs. Sitting inside his car, I sensed a whole new and fresh world, which made me feel somewhat anxious but excited. Denny first took me to a car repair shop and introduced me to his friends. They were all surprised that he had actually bought a dog, as they said Denny was not the type to stay at home. At first, I didn't fully understand what they meant, but luckily, I could feel that his friends already had a fondness for me. Denny also gave me a name, Enzo, which made me feel official to the family. Afterward, I was taken to a place that Denny said would be my new home. I busily sniffed around, exploring my surroundings. Although there was no grass, I figured I could manage and decided to leave my first ever mark in the house. Denny noticed and quickly pulled me out of the house, urging me to do my business outside instead. However, I felt somewhat confused about why he wanted me to do so. I don't remember how long Denny waited for me to finish my business that day, but when we got back indoors, I couldn't resist leaving another mark there. Surprisingly, Denny wasn't mad at me. I saw relief on his face. Afterward, he put me in bed and told me to be a good boy as the next day would be a big day for both of us. I never knew I was afraid of darkness, and at 3 a.m., I went toward Denny to seek comfort with my crying puppy eyes. He took me to the living room and turned on a device where I saw that things in it could actually move. Later, I learned that this device is called a television. Denny switched to a channel where many cars were racing swiftly. I loved it, and as Denny took both my paws to pretend we were racing, too, I could smell his passion for it. The following day, he took me to a place that looked exactly like the one I saw on TV. Seeing so many cars and the racing atmosphere made me feel like I was in heaven. For the first time, I realized that Denny was a car racer. Everyone and everything there left me in awe. I overheard the coach talking about how great Denny was at car racing, which made me feel so proud of my owner. Suddenly, heavy rain poured down, but this didn't deter Denny's speed. He navigated the autodrome with determination and steadiness. I felt like I'd witnessed true greatness when he won the game. Denny didn't forget me. He hugged me tightly in front of the cheering crowd, and we celebrated my first ever car race victory together. From that day on, I became a regular guest at car racing events. Denny took me wherever he went, and I must say, my childhood was nothing short of perfect. Watching him win more and more races, I couldn't have been happier. Most of our time together, we would run together in the morning, and when night fell, we would snuggle together in bed and discuss what he could do better in the races. Some years passed, and it was always just me and Denny. I loved how he always looked at me with gentleness, calling me a good boy. He was my champion alone. Until one day, he took me shopping, and from outside the window, I saw Denny talking to a woman. From the scent emanating from his body, I could smell that something was changing in him. Denny introduced me to Eve and told me she was a friend he had just met. I had to admit, I suddenly felt a sense of threat as I firmly believed this woman would snap Denny away from me. So, without asking Denny, I turned my way, urging him to leave that dangerous woman behind. However, Denny was clearly captivated by Eve. Before we left, he invited her to a band show for the night, an event I always thought was exclusive to us, the homies. At night, Eve also showed up at our house after the show. Strangely, my other two human buddies also seemed to like her a lot. I felt bitter that she was even invited to see Denny's next car race, because she almost knew nothing about racing, but for some reason, Denny didn't seem to mind. Day by day, as spring approached, Eve wasn't going anywhere. The attention that he lavished on her made me jealous as well. In no time, Eve moved in with us, and before I could even comprehend the situation, she and Denny got married, becoming my other owner. On their wedding day, I tried my best not to create any trouble, and for Denny's sake, I even handed over their wedding rings, although I didn't really like the idea. As a dog, not being able to talk allowed me to overhear conversations that humans wouldn't have in front of their kinds. During the wedding break, I overheard how Eve's parents talked about Denny. The old man never liked Denny because he thought living one's life as a car racer was putting the whole family at risk, especially a married man. At that moment, I started disliking this old man because Denny was my champion alone forever. Not long after, the three of us moved into another house. I was happy to have more room to roam around. I tried to communicate my feelings by making a fuss, hoping that Denny would pay more attention to me again. But as usual, my gestures were inevitably misinterpreted once again. I also sensed a mysterious new aura about Eve that prevented me from resenting her. While we took a walk outside, with Denny busy explaining his races, Eve revealed that she was pregnant. Denny became extremely excited, but I initially didn't understand what pregnant meant. As time passed, Eve's belly grew larger, and Denny took up an extra teaching job, leaving home frequently. I started spending more time alone with Eve at home. How she sighed and gently positioned herself reminded me of my mother. She called me to her side and placed my head on her belly, and that's when I realized she had a baby growing inside her. By all means, I just hoped the baby would look like me. During Christmas, I happily opened the gift Denny gave me. He asked Eve to join him in his next race in Florida to take care of her, but she encouraged him to pursue his dreams. That's one of the reasons why I didn't resent her. But, well, Eve gave birth to a baby girl while Denny was away for his race. Eve called me to her side, and I had never met a creature quite as beautiful as the little girl. From that moment on, I knew I would protect this little creature forever in my life. I couldn't express how much joy the little girl brought into the family. I became integral to her entertainment, playing fetch with tennis balls and gleefully chasing after them. In the blink of an eye, she turned 7. I was so immersed in her world that I almost forgot I was getting older as a dog. One day, all my worries about Denny were overshadowed by a scent. The smell coming from Eve made me feel scared. She started looking pale, and I wish I could warn her about what I noticed. However, I could only watch and feel empty inside because I could never talk. The day eventually came when Denny left for his race. In the morning, while I was watching his race on TV, I was caught off guard by Eve's vomiting in the kitchen. I rushed to her side, but to my dismay, she was getting worse, and the feeling of emptiness inside me only grew stronger. Everything happened so fast, and in just 5 minutes, they were gone. Not realizing that I was still in the house, seeing the pouring rain outside, I tried not to panic, as Denny always said panic was a racer's worst enemy. For the next few days, I patiently waited at home for Denny's return, without even food prepared for me. But as the clock kept ticking, I started to wonder if he would ever come back again. Several days later, I began to have hallucinations. I heard a noise from upstairs and weakly went to check on it. I saw the zebra toy laughing at me, and it felt as if it wanted to tear me apart. Knowing that I never liked it in the first place, I started to believe that this was a punishment for not liking the zebra toy. Denny finally came home, and thankfully, I had managed to survive on my own. He was angry to find out that Eve had left me alone in the house. Shortly after, Eve returned and apologized to me, but everything took a sharp turn when they discovered that I had torn apart all the toys in Zoe's room. It was the first time Denny got this mad at me, but I knew he was feeling somewhat vulnerable, struggling to balance between the family and his dream. Some days later, Denny left home again. Eve took me to the woods for a walk, and I still sensed that strange smell from her, but she was trying to stay strong. I never expected the day to come so quickly when I saw her collapse in front of me. In those moments, the urge to speak was truly maddening. All I could do was keep barking and watch as they took her away to the hospital. Sometimes I hated being a dog because they thought I didn't understand anything. Denny left me with the other pals so that he could take care of Eve, but I would have done anything to stay with him, letting him know he wasn't alone. From that day on, our family became different with Eve's absence. I often sit quietly in the house, seeing Denny try to pull his best together for us and how Zoe missed her mother. But days became weeks, and Eve didn't come back home. Denny got an extra job at the garage and did his best to take care of Zoe. However, when he returned home, I often saw him quiet, and then it would fall to me to provide what he needed. I figured out that was the only way to help him. By autumn, we all mastered new skills, and life seemed to return to normal with our efforts put. Another great news also arrived. Eve was permitted to return home from the hospital. Seeing her back well and fine had never more than been my dream because I realized how the family would have fallen apart without her. I didn't understand why good days wouldn't last. Suddenly they all said Eve wouldn't make it, but I thought if the demon were there to get Eve, he would have to get through me first, before she eventually left us. We all did our best to stay strong, trying not to let the sorrow take over us too much. We also decided to hold one last party to store the good memories. The night Eve asked me if I had seen this day coming, and told me that she wasn't afraid of leaving anymore as she knew it was not the end, and we would eventually meet somewhere else again. I placed my head next to her and watched her last breath free her soul. Denny was also there for her last ride of the journey. The next day, they all departed for Eve's funeral and left me alone in the empty and big house. I tried to capture Eve's last scent and memories and found the hat she used to wear often, the one I had laughed at before. It became a source of comfort for me, helping me bury my sadness. Since then, life never got any easier. Another bad news followed as Eve's father wanted to take custody of Zoe. I had never liked this old man. He never believed Denny to be a responsible man for the family and blamed him for Eve's death. Denny firmly refused the idea, but the old man was cunning, planning to sue him. In a fit of anger, he grabbed Denny's arms, causing him to fall and break his ribs. The next day, while we were at Denny's garage, 2 police officers barged in and handcuffed him. I became enraged and barked fiercely, but they still took him away. This was the second time in my life that I felt such helplessness, the first being the day Eve collapsed in the woods. In the evening, I was relieved to see Denny returning home, but I learned that he was going through an even harder time. The old man wanted to put him in jail for the injuries he sustained during the argument that day. Moreover, as a punishment, Denny was forbidden from seeing Zoe for 90 days. In the middle of those days, I received a call from Zoe's grandmother, saying that the little girl missed me and wanted to spend some time with me. When the day to visit Zoe came, I was thrilled to see her, and we played our old fetching game together. However, I could sense that she missed Denny a lot. For the first time, I felt lucky that I couldn't talk because I didn't know how to use words to comfort the little girl. But I didn't forget my main mission, which was to punish this old and cunning man. I needed to seek justice for my family. While he was preparing dinner, I purposely made him give me a chili pepper to eat. Even though I knew it was bad for a dog, I still took it anyway. Later, when he was focused on watching the news on TV, I released my concoction of steeped food from my stomach onto his carpet. Seeing his twisted face, I must admit I felt satisfied. As expected, I was immediately kicked out of that place and brought back to Denny. I couldn't recall how long it had been since I last saw Denny back in his racing career, but today, seeing him behind the wheel of that Ferrari, I felt he had somehow found his old self again. The smile on his face was something I hadn't seen in a long time. I knew he was meant for racing. A man even offered him a coaching job in Italy, but he turned it down because the custody of Zoe kept him grounded. Finally, day 90 arrived, and we both sat anxiously at the front door, waiting for Zoe to show up. It had been so long since we sat together as a family and enjoyed a meal. But later, Denny's attorney presented him with an offer: drop his custody claim to 206, and all the charges against him would disappear the next day. At night, I followed Denny out to run in the heavy rain. I sensed his anger as he ran faster and faster, and I struggled to keep up. He crossed the street, and in my hurry to catch up, I didn't see my way carefully. In an instant, I was hit by a car and started losing consciousness. On the way to the hospital, all I prayed for was to live longer, to be there for Denny. My prayers were answered, and despite my old age, the doctor said I had a fair chance of recovery. We returned home, and the attorney showed up again with papers for Denny to sign. I didn't think it was a good deal, so I mustered the strength to snatch the papers from him and tear them apart. I hoped he got the message that he should remain strong and fight for his rights. The court day arrived, and we prepared ourselves for the battle. I anxiously waited at home for some good news, and thankfully, we won the custody case. Finally, we could start a new life after all the sorrow. Denny decided to take the job in Italy, and we planned to move there together. However, my journey with Denny was coming to an end. One day, I could no longer stand up, and I lay in my own puddle, waiting for him to come back and clean up my mess. He came back and told me how much he loved me. He turned on my favorite car racing show and arranged a special race just for me. Like in the beginning, when he picked me up from that farm, I finished my last ride on the track, recalling how Denny had brought meaning to my dog's life. He told me I was his best friend ever. I barked loudly in response to let him know that I had loved him throughout my entire life. And so, I left this world with the knowledge that one day, I would find my way back to Denny after 7 years of separation, and in another life form.
My son talks about you always.
Come ti chiami?
Enzo.
Enzo.
On a scorching hot day, a dog struggles to drag a heavy load. Laboring to move forward, the owner still finds the dog too slow, constantly whipping and urging him on. Eventually, the dog is abandoned on the roadside with its skin torn open. Fortunately, a kind-hearted grandfather and grandson happen to pass by. The young boy, Nello, looks at the barely breathing large dog and asks his grandfather if they can adopt him. He even mentions that the dog can have his share of food. A few years ago, on a snowy and blustery night, the mother arrived at her father's house carrying young Nello in her arms, pleading with him to take good care of the boy. Sadly, she passed away that very night due to illness. From that day on, the two look out for each other and live by selling milk to the townspeople. Though the family is not wealthy, Nello is taken good care of with his grandfather's love. They take the dog home, and Nello gives him food. Unfortunately, the dog is seriously injured and refuses to eat anything. Nello is worried and asks his grandfather what he can do, but the old man tells him that he should give him love and he will heal. Upon hearing that, Nello kisses the dog on his head and makes him a wreath out of tree leaves, hoping the dog will recover soon. At night, Nello starts painting for the dog, but his grandfather tells him that the dog looks too sad in the portrait and encourages him to draw something he hopes to see. Since then, Nello always draws the dog to be happy and healthy. As time passes, the dog starts eating under Nello's great care and love and eventually fully recovers. They name the dog Patrash, after Nello's mother's middle name. It brings happiness to Nello, as he believes his mother and the dog will always watch over him. Nello has always stayed at home with his grandfather, as the old man's health is declining due to his age. The boy worries that his grandfather might leave him like his mother did. However, the old man frequently encourages Nello to go out and have fun with his friends. Later that day, Nello takes Patrash to meet his best friend, Alois. Despite coming from a wealthy and well-educated family, which is quite different from Nello's background, the differences never become a barrier between them. Nello returns home after meeting Alois because he needs to prepare dinner for his grandfather, who has been sick for days. The boy creates another magical wreath and presents it to his grandfather, hoping for his swift recovery. In response, the grandfather presents a painting album, explaining that it's from Nello's late mother. She wanted the boy to have it. This is the first time Nello discovers his mother's talent for painting. Upon seeing a portrait of her hero, Peter Paul Rubens, Nello becomes determined to follow in her footsteps and explore the town. Suddenly, the landlord Stevens rudely barges in and demands the house rent. Nello hands over a few coins they had earned in the past few days, but the man complains about Nello's grandfather falling sick again and declares his impatience to wait any longer. Nello becomes frustrated due to their unavoidable living conditions, but the presence of his grandfather and Alois helps him find his smile once more. The following day, Patrash awakens Nello, leaping excitedly to persuade him to go outside. Nello and his grandfather follow the dog outdoors, where Patrash is eager to take over the old man's responsibilities and assist Nello with the milk run. Patrash, now fully recovered, is excited to work alongside Nello. However, he runs too fast, causing the young boy to stumble multiple times on their way to the town. Their first stop is at an iron mill. The owner holds a deep fondness for Nello and Patrash. Upon learning the dog's name, the man promptly decides to craft a new, soft leather harness to replace the old one, aiming to improve comfort. Afterward, They continue their milk delivery to the town and pass by a cathedral. Nello shares with Patrash that inside the cathedral, there is a marvelous painting his mother used to admire. He wishes he could see it too. During today's milk run, Nello brings along the portrait of Peter Paul Rubens that his mother had drawn and managed to locate the correct sculpture. As he stands before the statue, missing his mother, a painting master named La Grande approaches Nello and imparts the wisdom that great men and their deeds continue to live on. These words open up a whole new world for Nello, igniting his inner desire to become an artist. Meanwhile, another painting master also arrives. From a distance, the man ridicules Nello for selling milk and engaging in activities that do not align with his poor identity. Despite this, the man invites Nello to the cathedral to view Rubens' most famous painting, which Nello's mother used to admire. Nello cautiously follows behind, fearing he might tarnish their esteemed status. Just then, Patrash comes searching for Nello, which infuriates a priest who believes that allowing such a street child and dog inside would desecrate the sanctity of the holy place. As they gasp for breath on the street, Patrash's previous owner suddenly appears and menacingly demands that Nello hand over the dog. Patrash becomes frightened upon seeing the man, prompting Nello to instruct him to escape urgently. The scene quickly devolves into chaos as bystanders rush to Nello's aid. The man grabs a cleaver and nearly strikes La Grande, but in a heroic act, Patrash leaps to the rescue, ultimately saving his life. La Grande takes Nello and Patrash to his studio. Nello is amazed by one of the portraits drawn by his best female student. The man expresses regret for not valuing the student in the past. Nello shows him his drawing of Alois, which astonishes La Grande and fills him with admiration. He encourages the boy to keep drawing and to follow his heart wholeheartedly. A few years later, Nello grows older, always accompanied by Patrash. La Grande returns to the town and is taken aback by Nello's improving drawing skills. He prepares various brushes and pigments as Christmas gifts for the boy and encourages him to participate in the Rubens Jr. Art Contest. However, Nello becomes frustrated again, knowing his humble background has a slim chance of winning against the noble children. But when the man tells him that the prize is 1,000 silver francs, the boy is overjoyed. Nello hopes to win to attend school and, more importantly, support his family. Later, he meets Alois to share the good news and shows her the portrait he drew for her. Their friendship remains unchanging over the years, despite Alois's father disliking Nello due to his perception of Nello's poor background and lack of education. Later that evening, the two kids come across a circus performing in town. They secretly approach and enjoy their adventure. A fortune teller notices them and invites them over, predicting they will become great couples as they grow older. She also gifts Nello a ring. Nello immediately places it on Alois's finger. The two kids and the dog revel in the night's fun and eventually fall asleep in the open. In the morning, Alois's father grows worried and begins searching for his daughter. He eventually finds them and admonishes Alois. Later, he plans to buy the portrait Nello had drawn for Alois, intending to sever the bond between the two kids. However, Nello refuses to sell it, believing that Alois is far too precious to part with, even in painting form. A few days later, Nello notices that Alois seems unhappy and frequently in tears, but he's hesitant to approach her. She often locks herself in her room and wonders when they will meet again. Back home, Nello realizes his grandfather is crafting a doll for Alois's upcoming birthday. Nello confesses that he's not planning to attend her birthday celebration this year and becomes frustrated. However, the old man reminds him that life is filled with ups and downs, reigniting Nello's determination not to give up on Alois. Later that night, as everyone sleeps, Nello sneaks out and climbs to Alois's bedroom window, carrying her birthday gift. Nello reassures Alois to wait patiently for the painting competition. He promises to win it and earn money so nobody will ever look down on him again. He kisses Alois on the cheek and departs for the night. However, a fire breaks out at Alois's house. The flames quickly spread to their barns. Neighbors rush to help, including Nello's frail and elderly grandfather. With a collective effort, they manage to extinguish the fire, but the damage is done, resulting in the sudden bankruptcy of the Alois family overnight. In the morning, they gather to discuss the fire's cause. The landlord, Stevens, informs Alois's father that he saw Nello visiting Alois the previous night, leading him to believe that Nello had set the fire intentionally. Furious, Aloise's father smashes the doll to the ground and becomes convinced that Nello harbors ill intentions due to his resentment for separating him from his daughter. From then on, almost everyone in town turns against Nello, refusing to buy milk from him, making his survival even more challenging. The owner of the iron mill, who dislikes Stevens, offers Nello a job to help support his family. However, tragedy strikes again as Nello's grandfather dies from a stroke, leaving Nello utterly alone. With the help of the iron mill owner, they lay the old man to rest. Nello is determined to win the art competition to gain recognition and break free from being looked down upon. He isolates himself at home, dedicating all his efforts to improving his painting skills until the submission day arrives. Meanwhile, Alois sneaks out of her house often, and the two children secretly meet to encourage one another. On the day of submission, Nello arrives a few minutes late, and at first, the judge refuses to accept his entry. However, upon seeing Nello's painting, he is astonished and immediately takes it. For the first time, Nello feels a glimmer of hope in his life, a chance to prove his worth. While practicing drawing at home late at night, Stevens reappears and demands the overdue rent. Nello pleads for more time, but the man gives him an ultimatum, surrendering his dog for rent or vacating the house by the following day. As a result, Nello and Petrash find themselves homeless again, with no shelter over their heads. Nello sneaks into the art competition venue and awaits the announcement, hoping for the best award. His dreams shatter when he realizes the winner is a noble child with subpar painting skills. Now true orphans, Nello and Petrash rely solely on each other. They trudge through the snowy and blustery night, nearly starving. Unexpectedly, Petrash discovers a wallet buried in the snow belonging to Aloise's father. They promptly return the wallet without taking a single coin. Nello pleads with Aloise's mother to offer shelter to Petrash, explaining that the dog found the wallet. The woman agrees and expresses her willingness to take both of them in. However, Nello leaves Petrash at their home and departs quietly, resolved to die and reunite with his family, who truly love him. Aloise's father returns home and is shocked to learn that Nello and Petrash found his wallet. To his surprise, the maid reveals that Nello was not responsible for the fire. Instead, it was Stevens who, while intoxicated, accidentally ignited his pipe in the shed. Aloise's father and Petrash hurriedly search for Nello, ringing the town bell to alert everyone. The townspeople join the search, but Nello is weakened by the cold and collapses. Hours later, he regains consciousness and makes his way to the Rubens sculpture, waiting for his impending death. Suddenly, Petrash finds him before anyone else. Facing the cold, Nello decides to take Petrash to the cathedral to view the Rubens painting and find shelter for the night. Nello pulls the painting's cord with all his strength, but the darkness obscures their view. He lights a candle to warm themselves and assures Petrash they will see the artwork in the morning, and afterward, they can join their loved ones, whoever truly cared for them. Morning breaks, and Nello and Petrash finally see the painting. To their astonishment, Nello's hero, Rubens, appears and speaks to him. Rubens takes Nello and Petrash along to reunite with his mother. Nello meets his mother for the first time and hesitates to leave her side when he witnesses his own funeral in Seoul, realizing that only his late family truly loved him. Eventually, everyone discovers Nello and Petrash nearly lifeless on the frozen ground. Relieved to find them still breathing, Nello is reunited with his father, La Grande, who had never known Nello was his son but had loved him from the beginning. If you like my channel or enjoy watching me dance, please leave a comment in the comments section saying dance, Adam.
The dog, with scars and blood marring his face, suddenly lunges at the people in the car. The mother quickly shuts the window. Despite her efforts, the dog continues his assault on the open door. After multiple failed attempts, he leaps onto the car roof, desperately scratching and clawing the windows, causing the people inside to scream in horror. No one expects their neighbor's dog, Cujo, to attack people suddenly. Cujo is a St. Bernard dog. Despite being intimidating due to his size, he is extremely docile and playful. He has been living on a large farm with his mechanic family. While Cujo is roaming outside that day, a hare suddenly captures his attention. Driven by his playful instincts, he begins to chase it through the woods. Eventually, the hare darts into a small concealed hole, prompting Cujo to follow eagerly. However, due to his size, his head becomes wedged as he enters. His noisy barking quickly disturbs the bats, leading to him being bitten on the head and fleeing. Elsewhere in the town, Tad gets ready to sleep, but as a little boy, he gets chills upon seeing the ajar closet door. Mustering his courage, Tad carefully closes the door and dashes over to his bed, covering himself. However, the door opens itself again. Strange humming sounds fill the room, prompting the boy to scream. His parents soon rush to his room to investigate what's going on. Tad tells them he's seen a monster with red eyes and sharp teeth, but the adults claim it only exists in stories and leave him to sleep alone again. The boy spends the whole night murmuring about the monster, and eventually, he stacks all the furniture to block the closet door. Their neighbor Dean visits the house during their breakfast and brings Tad a horse as a gift. Everyone is happy to see Dean, except the mother, Donna, who seems to be in a trance. In the afternoon, Tad's father, Jim, drives to a nearby repair shop to fix his car, but the owner is too occupied to help him. In a moment of frustration, the mailman suggests he go to another shop just 6 miles away, where the owner, Joe, is skilled and charges reasonable prices. Jim takes his wife and son to the garage shortly after, where Joe greets them warmly. Donna wanders around the area and comes across Joe's wife, but she immediately feels trance-like again upon seeing the woman being a housewife. Just at that moment, Cujo happily returns, his fluffy ears swaying in the air. Donna instinctively grabs Tad to avoid the big dog, but Joe and his son assure them that Cujo is safe and friendly with the kids. Tad is instantly drawn to Cujo. He pets the dog, and Cujo responds in kind. Night falls, and Jim holds Tad in his arms, searching the room for any signs of a monster, assuring him that no monster will ever come. The following day, Jim wakes up to find that the sharp cereal has caused all the children to vomit, and the commercials he's in charge of are still playing all over the TV, causing Jim to panic. However, Donna doesn't believe it and simply brushes her husband off. As usual, once Jim leaves home, she goes over to Dean's house and conducts their business there. Jim vaguely senses that something is wrong with his wife but never confronts her, until one day, when he picks up Tad from school, he sees Donna in a heated exchange with Dean by the roadside. He turns his car around to confront her, but it's too late. They have already distanced themselves. On the other hand, Cujo gradually weakens, lying lifeless outside with flies swarming around his wound. The clanging sound of the electrowelding gets on his nerves, prompting him to run away. By nighttime, Cujo's condition has worsened. Hearing the strident sound of Joe's car returning, Cujo is immediately alerted and walks toward the house to greet Joe, just as he usually does. However, his eyes have turned red, and white discharge flows from his nose. Not wanting to frighten them away, Cujo secretly hides in another place. Joe becomes enraged when he discovers his wife has purchased a welding machine without his permission. However, upon learning that she has won the lottery, he agrees to let her and their son leave to visit relatives for a week. Later, he takes Cujo with him to visit his best friend, both men harboring inappropriate intentions. Cujo overhears everything but is too weak to warn the woman. The next day, when Jim picks up Tad and returns home, he finally catches Donna having an affair with Dean, his best friend. To clear his mind, Jim decides to leave home for a 10-day business trip to address his commercial troubles. Tad worries that the monster will return for him, but Jim assures the boy that he'll write down protective spells and post them in his room to ward off the monster before he departs. Tad finally sleeps peacefully after a long time, unaware that a real monster is about to invade his worst nightmares. Joe's son wakes up early to pack his bags. As he ventures outside searching for his beloved dog, he discovers that Cujo's eyes have turned completely red, and a white discharge is oozing from his face. Cujo barks aggressively at him, but with the boy's reassurance, the dog retreats quietly. The boy rushes home to alert his mother about Cujo's condition, but she dismisses it, and they depart for their trip. Cujo wanders helplessly in the street and catches the attention of their neighbor. Knowing that the man has never been friendly to him, Cujo growls, scaring him away. The dog quickly charges toward him, knocking him down. However, the man's harsh words only provoke Cujo further. With a steady gaze into the man's eyes, Cujo breaks into his house, attacking and killing him before he can draw his gun. Meanwhile, Joe calls out for Cujo in the streets but can't locate him. Frustrated, he leaves food out for him and heads to his best friend's house. Upon arrival, Joe is shocked to find the door torn apart and bloodstains outside. As he steps inside to investigate, he discovers his friend dead, his throat brutally torn open. Before he can react or call the police, Cujo suddenly appears and kills him on the spot. Later in the afternoon, Donna takes Tad to the garage to have her car fixed, as Jim had instructed her to do. Upon arrival, Donna feels uneasy about the desolate surroundings. She returns to the car to help Tad with his seatbelt, and suddenly, Cujo lunges at them with a bloodied face. Donna struggles to close the window with all her strength, but Cujo persists and moves to the other side of the car, attempting to open it. The sudden attack terrifies Tad, who repeatedly claims that he had seen Cujo, the monster, in his closet before. After several unsuccessful attempts, Cujo finally backs off and walks away. Donna immediately tries to start the car, but luck is not on their side as it breaks down completely. The mother and son remain trapped in the car for the next few hours, not daring to step outside as Cujo keeps watch nearby. Tad's patience wears thin, and he urges his mother to try starting the car again. The sound of the car starting immediately grabs Kyujo's attention, and he rushes toward the vehicle. Donna gives Kyujo a hostile stare as she drives away, but their car unexpectedly loses power. The sun's searing heat intensifies, affecting both the ground and their car's interior. Donna is reluctant to move with Kyujo's gaze fixed on them. Meanwhile, Jim becomes increasingly worried about their well-being and repeatedly calls home. Receiving no response, Kyujo remains by their car throughout the night, patiently waiting for his chance. Just then, the sudden ringing of a phone gets on his nerves once more, prompting him to investigate. The next morning, Donna wakes up to find Kyujo staring at her hungrily. She surveys their surroundings and spots a bat lying on the ground, wondering if she can use it to distract the dog. Tad is thirsty, but Donna forbids him from drinking the little water they have left, suggesting they wait for the mailman to arrive. Unbeknownst to them, the mailman has been instructed not to make deliveries that day. The echoing phone ringing drives Kyujo to madness once more. He dashes over, forcefully striking the car door with his head. Bloodstains start to accumulate on the door as he relentlessly attacks. He cracks through the window, fiercely attempting to bite them to death. Inside the car, temperatures continue to rise, and Tad becomes increasingly dehydrated. Donna gathers her courage, breaks open the door and steps out of the car, unaware that Kyujo is right behind her. He lunges at her, sinking his teeth into her leg. In desperation, Donna wields the water bottle as a weapon, striking his head and forcing him to retreat momentarily. Meanwhile, Jim decides to cut his business trip short and return home since he can't reach his family. Upon his arrival, he finds their house in disarray and promptly reports it to the police. Upon discovering a torn-up picture of Donna, the police suspect Dean, Donna's lover, of kidnapping both her and Tad. They also learn that Donna went to Joe's garage and sent an officer to investigate. The officer arrives at the garage, confidently stepping out of his car, unaware of the impending danger, as he notices significant bloodstains on a car and approaches to investigate. Kyujo lunges at him and takes him down within seconds, driven by his hunger for prey. Another few days pass, and Tad's consciousness begins to wane as his heartbeat weakens. Realizing that she's losing her son, Donna leaves the car searching for water. She seizes the bat, engaging in a battle with the insane Kyujo. As Kyujo prepares to deliver a fatal bite, Donna manages to thrust a knife into his stomach, causing the dog to close his eyes. Donna swiftly carries Tad to the house in search of water. With her care, he slowly begins to recover. However, just as they believe their ordeal is over, Kyujo breaks through the window, poised to deliver his final deadly attack. In a state of desperation, Donna seizes the gun and fires it. The resounding gunshot echoes in the air just as Jim arrives, realizing that his wife and son have just endured the most terrifying monster nightmare of their lives. If you like my channel or enjoy watching me dance, please leave a comment in the comment section saying dance, Adam.
Seeing the bison rushing towards him fast, the young Keita was so scared that his mind froze. All he could do was run forward by instinct. Clearly, he was no match for the bison. Keita was knocked hard to the ground by the bison's horns, and fresh blood spilled from the corner of his mouth. He was badly hurt. His father saw this and got really worried. He shouted at Keita to run away quickly, but the bison made a second attack. The big bison horns hooked onto Keita's belt and dragged his body towards the cliff, trying to get revenge for its dead fellows. In the chaos, Keita's father pulled out his spear as hard as he could and stabbed it deep into the bison's body. But it was too late. Keita had already been thrown off the cliff. Fortunately, Keita grabbed a stone sticking out on the cliff's edge. His father told him not to let go, but the next second, the stone cracked, and Keita's body plunged down the cliff uncontrollably, hitting the stones sticking out all the way down. Fortunately, while falling, he was caught by a stone sticking out in the middle of the cliff, but his life or death was uncertain. His father's heart was broken. He tried hard to save his son, but was held back by his tribesmen. According to their past experiences, falling from such a height surely meant death. They told him not to take the risk. His father didn't want to accept this. He stayed by the cliff all night. By daybreak, he still hadn't got any response from his son. He was in despair. With the help of his tribesmen, he held a simple ceremony for his son and then reluctantly left. Nobody noticed what was happening to the rock. A vulture landed beside a corpse on the rock and pecked at it without hesitation, ready to have a big meal. But then, the corpse suddenly opened its eyes. It turned out that Keita wasn't dead. He had just passed out after coming to. Keita was in deep despair. He didn't know how to get out of this dangerous place. He held the edge of the rock tight and called for his father as loud as he could, but nobody answered. To stay alive, he had to climb down the rock wall with his hurt leg, trying to get out of danger by himself. Sadly, he got into an even more dangerous spot. What was scarier was that it started to rain. The rain was breaking down Keita's will, and he was almost giving up. All of a sudden, Keita saw that the water at the bottom of the cliff was rising and the valley had become a large pool of water. so he took a chance and let the flood cover him. After the flood went away, Kata was lucky to be alive, but his leg was badly hurt and he couldn't walk on his own at all. With a lot of effort, he crawled to a puddle. After getting some water and energy, Kata could think again. He used some stones to fix his hurt leg and leaned his body backward hard. With a crack, the dislocated joint was reset, and finally Kata could walk. He limped back to the cliff where the accident happened, but he only saw the stone tablet his father had put up for him. Kata was angry and felt powerless because it meant that nobody would come back for him. He had to find his way home alone, but in the big wilderness. Danger was everywhere. It was hard to imagine going home alone. As expected, Kata was surrounded by wolves. He dragged his hurt leg and climbed up a tree with a lot of trouble. But a mean wolf bit his pants leg and pulled him down hard. At the important moment, Kata took out a dagger and stabbed it hard into the wolf's neck. Only then did he get away from the wolf's mouth. He climbed to the top of the tree to hide until the wolves left. Only then did Kata dare to come down. Unexpectedly, that hurt wolf was left behind. Kata looked at the wolf with weak breath and felt very hesitant. Deciding whether to kill it or not was a tough choice. After a long time, Kata's heart softened. This boy slowly lowered the raised spear and untied the rope around it. Then he walked towards the injured wolf. He carefully tied the wolf's muzzle with the rope. After making sure Alpha couldn't hurt anyone anymore, Kata carried it on his shoulder and took it to the river to clean its wounds. By the time he finished this, it was completely dark, so they had to find a cave for the night. After getting Alpha settled, Kata lay on the ground tiredly, but at night, the temperature suddenly dropped and Kata had to find a way to make a fire to keep warm. Unfortunately, he failed. One day came. Kata went out alone to get some herbs. Then he crushed them and put them on his foot. But he didn't forget the lesson from yesterday's failure and started to use dry grass to make a fire. Alpha had been watching all the time. It was like a wise person, quietly watching what Kata could do. Finally, with Kata's efforts, the dry grass became aflame successfully. He made it. Alpha rushed towards Kata excitedly, but Kata misunderstood its intention and thought it wanted to snatch his food. Kata didn't know that his accidental actions had actually tamed this proud wild wolf, especially after eating a piece of roasted rabbit meat that Kata shared. Alpha was completely convinced and didn't even want to leave Kata. Kata's foot injury had nearly recovered. He started to pack his stuff, then said goodbye to Alpha and started his journey home again, but Alpha quietly followed him. Even when it was found and driven away harshly, it still didn't want to leave. It even picked up Kata's wooden stick and gave it to Back, wagging its tail to show its friendship. In this way, the world's first dog tamed by humans was born. With Alpha by his side, Kata's journey home wasn't lonely anymore. Whenever they were hungry, they'd hunt together. When sleepy, they'd sleep cuddled up. When dirty, they'd take a bath in the river. As time passed, their friendship got deeper. But then winter came. The vast wilderness was covered in white snow and ice, and the cold air rushed over the ice real fast. Walking became super hard. The boy ran fast through the snow, trying to get out of this dangerous area, but he accidentally stepped on the thin ice and soon fell in. The icy water covered his body right away. Kata kept struggling to get up, but he was getting farther from the hole. He tried hard to break the ice, but couldn't. Alpha was also trying to break the ice, but its weight was too light to do anything. In a panic, Kata found a dagger. He stabbed it hard into the ice. After doing it many times, a hole was finally made. Seeing this, Alpha quickly bit Kata's sleeve and tried to drag him out. It was so cold that Kata almost couldn't move. With Alpha's comfort, Kata got a little strength back and started to make a fire by drilling wood. Finally, the fire was lit. Kata took off his frozen clothes right away and lay by the fire, hugging Alpha to keep warm. Only when he felt better did they start their journey home again. After walking for a while, they suddenly started running excitedly because Kata saw an old man not far away. He rushed to say hello, but found the old man didn't move at all. He was frozen to death, and there was nothing in his tent for energy. Kata was tortured by illness and hunger. He was almost hopeless. The only good thing was that he still had Alpha. They braved the wind and snow and kept going with great difficulty. Finally, they came to a stone tablet and brushed off the thick snow on it. Kata was sure home wasn't far, but their bodies were at the limit. Alpha walked slower and finally collapsed. Unable to stand up, Kata looked at his partner, who was too weak to even open his eyes and felt very sad. But he didn't abandon it. Instead, he carried it and kept going. He couldn't lose his good friend. With the belief of going home, Kata carried Alpha and walked back to the tribe step by step before finally collapsing. His father couldn't believe his son, who had fallen off the cliff, had come back alive. They hugged each other excitedly, and Alpha was saved with everyone's efforts. Since then, it has lived in the human tribe and become the most loyal and reliable dog friend of humans. This boy slowly lowered the raised spear and untied the rope around it. Then he walked towards the injured wolf. He carefully tied the wolf's muzzle with the rope. After making sure Alpha couldn't hurt anyone anymore, Keita carried it on his shoulder and took it to the river to clean its wounds. By the time he finished this, it was completely dark, so they had to find a cave for the night. After getting Alpha settled, Keita lay on the ground tiredly, but at night, the temperature suddenly dropped and Keita had to find a way to make a fire to keep warm. Unfortunately, he failed. When day came, Keita went out alone to get some herbs. Then he crushed them and put them on his foot. But he didn't forget the lesson from yesterday's failure and started to use dry grass to make a fire. Alpha had been watching all the time. It was like a wise person, quietly watching what Keita could do. Finally, with Keita's efforts, the dry grass became aflame successfully. He made it. Alpha rushed towards Keita excitedly, but Keita misunderstood its intention and thought it wanted to snatch his food. Keita didn't know that his accidental actions had actually tamed this proud wild wolf, especially after eating a piece of roasted rabbit meat that Keita shared. Alpha was completely convinced and didn't even want to leave Keita. Keita's foot injury had nearly recovered. He started to pack his stuff, then said goodbye to Alpha and started his journey home again, but Alpha quietly followed him. Even when it was found and driven away harshly, it still didn't want to leave. It even picked up Keita's wooden stick and gave it to Beck, wagging its tail to show its friendship. In this way, the world's first dog tamed by humans was born. With Alpha by his side, Keita's journey home wasn't lonely anymore. Whenever they were hungry, they'd hunt together. When sleepy, they'd sleep cuddled up. When dirty, they'd take a bath in the river. As time passed, their friendship got deeper. But then winter came. The vast wilderness was covered in white snow and ice, and the cold air rushed over the ice real fast. Walking became super hard. The boy ran fast through the snow, trying to get out of this dangerous area, but he accidentally stepped on the thin ice and soon fell in. The icy water covered his body right away. Keita kept struggling to get up, but he was getting farther from the hole. He tried hard to break the ice, but couldn't. Alpha was also trying to break the ice, but its weight was too light to do anything. In a panic, Keita found a dagger. He stabbed it hard into the ice. After doing it many times, a hole was finally made. Seeing this, Alpha quickly bit Keita's sleeve and tried to drag him out. It was so cold that Keita almost couldn't move. With Alpha's comfort, Keita got a little strength back and started to make a fire by drilling wood. Finally, the fire was lit. Keita took off his frozen clothes right away and lay by the fire, hugging Alpha to keep warm. Only when he felt better did they start their journey home again. After walking for a while, they suddenly started running excitedly because Keita saw an old man not far away. He rushed to say hello, but found the old man didn't move at all. He was frozen to death, and there was nothing in his tent for energy. Keita was tortured by illness and hunger. He was almost hopeless. The only good thing was that he still had Alpha. They braved the wind and snow and kept going with great difficulty. Finally, they came to a stone tablet and brushed off the thick snow on it. Keita was sure home wasn't far, but their bodies were at the limit. Alpha walked slower and finally collapsed, unable to stand up. Keita looked at his partner, who was too weak to even open his eyes and felt very sad. But he didn't abandon it. Instead, he carried it and kept going. He couldn't lose his good friend. With the belief of going home, Keita carried Alpha and walked back to the tribe step by step before finally collapsing. His father couldn't believe his son, who had fallen off the cliff, had come back alive. They hugged each other excitedly, and Alpha was saved with everyone's efforts. Since then, it has lived in the human tribe and become the most loyal and reliable dog friend of humans. A vulture landed beside a corpse on the rock and pecked at it without hesitation, ready to have a big meal. But then, the corpse suddenly opened its eyes. It turned out that Keita wasn't dead. He had just passed out. After coming to, Keita was in deep despair. He didn't know how to get out of this dangerous place. He held the edge of the rock tight and called for his father as loud as he could, but nobody answered. To stay alive, he had to climb down the rock wall with his hurt leg, trying to get out of danger by himself. Sadly, he got into an even more dangerous spot. What was scarier was that it started to rain. The rain was breaking down Keita's will, and he was almost giving up. All of a sudden, Keita saw that the water at the bottom of the cliff was rising and the valley had become a large pool of water. So he took a chance and let the flood cover him. After the flood went away, Keita was lucky to be alive, but his leg was badly hurt and he couldn't walk on his own at all. With a lot of effort, he crawled to a puddle. After getting some water and energy, Keita could think again. He used some stones to fix his hurt leg and leaned his body backward hard. With a crack, the dislocated joint was reset, and finally Keita could walk. He limped back to the cliff where the accident happened, but he only saw the stone tablet his father had put up for him. Keita was angry and felt powerless because it meant that nobody would come back for him. He had to find his way home alone, but in the big wilderness, danger was everywhere. It was hard to imagine going home alone. As expected, Keita was surrounded by wolves. He dragged his hurt leg and climbed up a tree with a lot of trouble. But a mean Wolf bit his pants leg and pulled him down hard. At the important moment, Kata took out a dagger and stabbed it hard into the Wolf's neck. Only then did he get away from the Wolf's mouth. He climbed to the top of the tree to hide until the wolves left. Only then did Kata dare to come down. Unexpectedly, that hurt Wolf was left behind. Kata looked at the Wolf with weak breath and felt very hesitant. Deciding whether to kill it or not was a tough choice. After a long time, Kata's heart softened, seeing the bison rushing towards him fast. The young Kata was so scared that his mind froze. All he could do was run forward by instinct. Clearly, he was no match for the bison. Kata was knocked hard to the ground by the bison's horns, and fresh blood spilled from the corner of his mouth. He was badly hurt. His father saw this and got really worried. He shouted at Kata to run away quickly, but the bison made a second attack. The big bison horns hooked onto Kata's belt and dragged his body towards the cliff, trying to get revenge for its dead fellows. In the chaos, Kata's father pulled out his spear as hard as he could and stabbed it deep into the bison's body. But it was too late. Kata had already been thrown off the cliff. Fortunately, Kata grabbed a stone sticking out on the cliff's edge. His father told him not to let go, but the next second, the stone cracked, and Kata's body plunged down the cliff uncontrollably, hitting the stones sticking out all the way down. Fortunately, while falling, he was caught by a stone sticking out in the middle of the cliff, but his life or death was uncertain. His father's heart was broken. He tried hard to save his son, but was held back by his tribesmen. According to their past experiences, falling from such a height surely meant death. They told him not to take the risk. His father didn't want to accept this. He stayed by the cliff all night. By daybreak, he still hadn't got any response from his son. He was in despair. With the help of his tribesmen, he held a simple ceremony for his son and then reluctantly left. Nobody noticed what was happening to the rock. The boy ran fast through the snow, trying to get out of this dangerous area, but he accidentally stepped on the thin ice and soon fell in. The icy water covered his body right away. Kata kept struggling to get up, but he was getting farther from the hole. He tried hard to break the ice, but couldn't. Alpha was also trying to break the ice, but its weight was too light to do anything. In a panic, Kata found a dagger. He stabbed it hard into the ice. After doing it many times, a hole was finally made. Seeing this, Alpha quickly bit Kata's sleeve and tried to drag him out. It was so cold that Kata almost couldn't move. With Alpha's comfort, Kata got a little strength back and started to make a fire by drilling wood. Finally, the fire was lit. Kata took off his frozen clothes right away and lay by the fire, hugging Alpha to keep warm. Only when he felt better did they start their journey home again. After walking for a while, they suddenly started running excitedly because Kata saw an old man not far away. He rushed to say hello, but found the old man didn't move at all. He was frozen to death, and there was nothing in his tent for energy. Kata was tortured by illness and hunger. He was almost hopeless. The only good thing was that he still had Alpha. They braved the wind and snow and kept going with great difficulty. Finally, they came to a stone tablet and brushed off the thick snow on it. Kata was sure home wasn't far, but their bodies were at the limit. Alpha walked slower and finally collapsed. Unable to stand up, Kata looked at his partner, who was too weak to even open his eyes and felt very sad. But he didn't abandon it. Instead, he carried it and kept going. He couldn't lose his good friend. With the belief of going home, Kata carried Alpha and walked back to the tribe step by step before finally collapsing. His father couldn't believe his son, who had fallen off the cliff, had come back alive. They hugged each other excitedly, and Alpha was saved with everyone's efforts. Since then, it has lived in the human tribe and become the most loyal and reliable dog friend of humans.